if you don't have a good representation of your network, if you only have a partial view of your network, then you're kind of flying blind.
Don't forget, there's an AI networking summit coming up, and you're invited. So go to the onug.net website to get your tickets now. So, and also if you're on YouTube or Spotify or any of the places where this podcast is being broadcast or streamed, make sure that you hit like or subscribe to it. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this chat with Damien Garros and of OpsMill. So they're kind of like right in the middle of kind of this AI renaissance that's happening in the NOC. And so so we're going to talk a lot about that, you know. So with that said, Damien, welcome. How you doing?
Hi, Nick. Very nice. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Awesome.
It's my favorite topic, so very happy to talk about it.
So it should be kind of easy, you know, no stress. Well, so we do have a couple of talking points that you know that I want us to go through. But why don't we first start? What we really like to do with the Built for Trust podcast is introduce people to the community. It's kind of a spotlight, you know, on thought leaders in the industry. And clearly you're one of them. So why don't you spend a little bit of time just talking about, you know, your career journey? What did you do before, you know, founding OpsMill? And what was the problem that you were seeing? And, you know, and basically what brought you to starting this company up?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, I come, you know, from the networking background. I actually, you know, started 20 years ago, and quite early in my careers, I really fall into in love with automation. And I think, you know, it's probably started around 2011, 2012, where at the time I was at Juniper, I was working with customer, and we had such amazing automation features in our product that I just saw the possibility of like how much automations will just enable me to solve more problems for my customers, give me more visibility. Like I was working with one of our biggest customer in France, and we had these scaling problems, and I just like went on and learned and all of that, and soon I was seeing myself as a software engineer, and really, you know, building more into the automation space. So I got very lucky because I was really part of the, you know, one of the first groups I get into this field. So I've seen it grown and mature over the year. And very quickly it became super obvious to me that the first things you need to do if you want to automate is to build a good have a good data management strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's been this change in the industry that the way to automate now requires you to have, you know, all your data under control, and it's actually one of the main reasons why one of the main difference between how to automate a network and automating cloud is when you automate the networks, you have 10 times more data to manage than when you need to automate the cloud. Anyway, so it became very obvious. So I went into down that path, and I started working on source of truth. I was involved very early on with the project like Netbox, for example. Like I worked very closely with the Jeremy that started that. I wrote the first plugin for Netbox. And then when I was at Network to Code, I was part of the team that started Notobot after. And we were always trying to push and build the best, you know, data management solutions to build all this automation. And at some point I really felt like none of the solutions we're building were good enough. I feel like they were okay, but there was always some problem we couldn't solve. And so I really felt like the urge of trying something to me that was really designed from the ground up to tackle that problem. And that's where I decided to, you know, start OpsMill and start InfraHub, which is the project that we're building.
Yeah, InfraHub. Okay, great. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for that background. So yeah, so it's like you kind of got the networking bug, it seems early in your career, and, you know, over at Juniper, and that expose you to a lot of different things, and or problems. And the laziest people in the world are the people who want to do automation, right? It's like we just don't want to do stuff. So it's like, all right, let me figure out how do I get something that can do this work for me. So not to say that you're lazy, but automation does save a lot of time, when you get it done right. And it is hard in network infrastructure because, like, really, out of an application and its entire dependency map, the network is the only source of truth, real truth, right? And we have so much data giving us the state of how a network is behaving, but but we have a very fractured vendor community that has defined how they communicate their logs, alerts, alarms very differently. Yeah, we have SNMP, we have SFlow, and in other protocols. But by and large, a lot of the real meaty stuff, that really gives you insight is all kind of proprietary, and those schemes are really only linked into a company's management systems as well. So that makes it really hard, where we don't have a federated approach. But I think that's we're gonna get to that. So there's a lot of discussion in the industry around agentic, AI, and especially about how enterprises can use them. And now, so agentic AI is a really big topic, right? So it's like it's both being, couched, for the rewriting of workflows in an organization, dismantling maybe system of record systems and customizing how organizations can now run their operations. And then in our industry infrastructure, we've been talking about agentic AI is taking over the lifecycle management, of that infrastructure. And all of that is actually linked, inextricably linked, even though we're all looking at it in different ways. But we're going to focus on the infrastructure, part of that. And I love your focus on data. Because data is really kind of the ultimate, provides root cause and also the ultimate, source of truth. So, what has to be true, about an enterprise's infrastructure and its data in order to get at a good source of truth system. So, so how have you thought through that?
Yeah. So maybe I think an important point to highlight is when we talk about data and infrastructure management, there's really two types of data, and both are critical. And in some way, they both have their own truths. There's one about what is actual state of the environment, and that's the type of data that you mentioned: the logs, the metrics, the traces, the flow, all of that.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that falls into this observability track nowadays, the new name for monitoring or all of that. So like that tells you what is going on, and it's super important for troubleshooting. Now, the data that we're focusing on is not this one. Like we're not playing into this field. We're not competitors to building observability. But there's another set of data that is critical, is what we call usually the intent, or intent is not my favorite word, but it's more like it defines what should exist in the environment. And that's also a very critical environment. And that's actually, think of it as everything you need to build a configuration and so much more. But even if you consider just everything you need to build a configuration of every single network device, that's a huge amount of information. And then there's actually so many things to talk about, like in terms of how do you actually explain why you need things. There's different level of abstractions, but without going there, like this data is so critical. And what we've been saying is, if you only have a partial understanding of the network, it's really hard to automate. It's actually been true for years. Everybody that's been looking at automating, the goal has been to be able to capture as much information as you can so that you know what you can touch and when you cannot touch.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is the same fact that if you don't have a good representation of your network, if you only have a partial view of your network, then you're kind of flying blind. Mm-hmm. And the same is going to happen to the agentic the AI agentic system tomorrow is that if we want them to be able to work in our environments, we need to give them a full view of understanding of what's going on. And if they don't have this kind of data to rely on, and to be fair, like they need both type of data that I mentioned, like they need the intent, but they also need the observability. And it's by comparing them that they understand what's not going right. Otherwise, just looking at what's going on, it's actually really hard to understand if something is it okay that this interface is down or not? Should I wake up somebody or not? Like if you don't know that this interface is in maintenance mode, you might panic seeing it down, but maybe it's actually okay for it to be down because you received an email from your circuit providers that tell you that this interface would be down between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So no point of waking up someone. That's kind of like the type of data that we manage this, what should be there, what is expected to be there. And
Okay,
that's why it's so
so
critical today to enable agentic system is, yeah, you need to provide this crucial context.
so give me some more examples. One, thank you so much for that split. You're right. It's like logs, traces, alerts, alarms. That's really observability domain. You're talking about something really different. So kind of almost like the intent of how the network is supposed to behave. So give me an example of that kind of data.
The easiest way is really everything you need to build a config. So if we're talking about a network device, that's going to be cabling information, IP addresses, VLAN information, routing information,
Mm-hmm.
security information. And usually what's happening is we're actually trying, because it's so much information in such a complex system,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually trying to capture it at a higher level. So for example, more and more customers today, what they want to store in InfraHub is, I want to store actually my list of application, and I want to be able to capture how they're expected to communicate at the application level. And then based on this information, I'm going to be able to generate every single access list for every single network device. But the real information that the customer care about is actually their list of application and their matrices of what should be permitted or denied. And that's this kind of information that ultimately you need to build your network device configuration.
Okay.
And that's what we capture. And you could take it at, we have nowadays, like, for example, we have customers, if this going up in terms of abstraction is very interesting. Like we have some customers now, they're building such massive data centers for AI that they don't want to capture and think about every single IP address. So they actually created a very high level of abstraction. They say, oh, I need this level of subscription, this level of link, this number of rack in my system. And then we're able to design everything for them and store all this information and generate the config. But that's maybe two different examples. I hope that makes it, that
Yeah,
answer
I'm
your
trying.
question.
Yeah, let me see if I can kind of feed that back. So it's almost like, okay, if you really want to understand the current state configuration, of your infrastructure, and almost like create a digital twin of it, then you probably want the routing tables, you want the ACLs, within the firewalls, you want a really good CBDB, to know all the kind of devices that are being connected, into that infrastructure. So was that kind of, where we're,
Digital twins, in my mind, like Forward Networks, which is a great company, they're usually more in the observability. Like
yeah.
we really, again, it's not just that, but I felt like it was the easiest to explain. Is we're usually limiting at what is required to configure the device. So, for example, the routing table is more of an ephemeral system that happens because the configuration is, the device is configured in a specific way, but we would not store the routing table. But we will store all the routing policies that will create this routing table,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you actually wants to, that's where the engineering magic is happening, is the complexity of those routing policy. That's what we would store and help you generate and all of that.
Okay. Okay. So I think I'm getting it. So it's like, um, why don't we spend, maybe just a moment talking about InfraHub, because I think that's probably where your head's at, right? Because like that's what embodies, these technologies, right? So, explain a little bit about InfraHub and kind of what it's designed to do.
Yeah. So think we covered in good lengths like this need for capturing the intent data and what it is. And now over the years, I've tried many different things, and to me, it comes down to like the often people. It's interesting is like when we explain what we do to a cloud engineer, they don't get it, and they don't get it because this component doesn't exist in cloud automation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the reason for that is they're actually using Git to store
Mm-hmm.
all of this information that we have in InfraHub because their volume of data is small enough that they can manage it in Git. And what's happening is in our space, the volume of data is so big, the amount of information that we have to manage means that we reached the limit of Git years ago, and people have been looking at a more powerful solutions to manage this large amount of data. And so everybody, especially with the coming of Netbox, 10 years ago, a lot of people started moving into more like database type application. But then along the way, we lost all the benefit of Git, which was amazing in terms of like version control and change management and review and
Collaboration.
traceability and all that. And so to me, the key foundation of infra was to say, we need to bring the best of Git and the best of enterprise type application together because that's what we really need. Like we've been struggling for 10 years trying to juggle with that. And I wanted a database that was, a great interface, a great query engine, all of that. But I also had version control that will make it very safe to make changes in isolation, review the data. And the other thing that was super, super important is we wanted to build a system that was extremely extensible. Like it's actually one of the property of this intent data is you always need to store new data that you didn't thought about yesterday. And if you're in more of a rigid system, it's become really frustrating that you cannot store that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in many ways also why cloud people have been staying with Git is Git actually doesn't impose anything on what you can store. It's just a text file. So it gives them this freedom. It has some drawback, but it gives them a lot of freedom. And we're like, okay, if we build the best possible intent management platform for the network, we need it to be super extensible, super flexible, and we needed to have the best of Git, plus all the other things you would expect from an enterprise application. And so that was really the driver behind InfraHub. And there's some massive technology challenges to actually do that. But yeah, took us a few years to build that, but very very happy with where we are, and we've been able to address those challenges in a very unique way.
I want to ask you to do a demo. It's like I know we didn't plan for that, but like actually, I would love to see this. It's like I haven't seen seen it in action.
Actually, there's a public sandbox if you want. I don't know if we want to do it now, but if
I'm
you want, I
okay to
can
do it
send you a link.
now. Yeah, if you want to bring it up, yeah, let's take a look.
Oh, okay, let's do it then.
If you're up for that.
Yeah. I'm always up for it. So that was totally unprepared.
Don't want to put you on the spot, Damien.
No, that's the best. That's the fun part. No issue. So we'll do a quick one, but I think it helps understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, so hopefully you can see my screen.
I can. Perfect. How great.
So it's actually the public instance that anyone can access at sandbox.infra.app.
Okay.
It's loaded with some example data and all of that. The main thing with InfraHub is, and it's just like if you actually spin it up, it's empty. And you need to define what you want to store in it. And so here we loaded data to say we want to store device information, we want to store circuits and IP addresses and routing information, but none of it is mandatory. It's like it's completely up to you to pick and choose what you want. We have a library of things but here, for example, you can store all the autonomous system ID and routing and BGP sessions and routing information, like all the things I mentioned earlier, like you could manage it through that. And everything is 100% customizable and like what you can store, but with very little effort to define what you want, and we give you a UI, we give you an API, we give you an SDK, we give you all of that for free, super easily. Now, the other interesting part that we talk about is, let's say if we go to an interface, for example, like here I can create a branch. So I'm just gonna use the standard login. And here, let's say now I want to prepare a change in this environment.
Okay.
And
So
in this case,
router on an Ethernet port.
I'm gonna create a branch. Here I call it 33. It doesn't matter, but it's gonna create it's actually super fast. Like we're not copying the data. It's really we're isolating now moving forward. Every change you're making will be done. It will not impact the production system. Like for example, if I want to change the speed of the interface to 555 and the MTU to something different and disable the interface, like I made multiple changes here. And we can see them reflected here, for example, but my main branch, which represents the production network, still has the previous value. Like I was able to make a change in complete isolation. And now if I want to integrate this change, I'm going to follow the standard, call that a proposed change. But what people are used to is like a pull request, for example, in the world of Git, where you can actually see everything I've changed in this branch. It's computing it here. But you're going to see everything I changed in this branch, and you will be able to review, and you'll be able to see exactly and accept the change or make a proposal. What's also going to happen is we have the ability to like run a number of checks automatically to identify if this change is safe for production. So, there's a lot of checks we do on our own, but you also have the ability to define your own checks. And then, so here you see a lot more checks that you're running. Is also going to try to regenerate all the configuration that would have been impacted with this change, for example. So it's another thing that is going on. And at the end, if you're fine with that, then you would be able to say, okay, I'm okay with this change, and I'm going to merge that and bring that into the main branch. So that's in a very 2 minutes, I think, the best overview. And we also have, maybe to be clear, like we actually have the ability, like the platforms also can help you render your config. So you can, this configuration, for example, it's completely dynamically generated, and that's, you have the ability to define what your configuration templates look like and all of that, and you will be able to manage all that for you in a way that you just need to take this config next and deploy. No, that's something we don't do. So we do need to integrate with either Ansible or iTentials or any glueware or any systems that is more in the orchestration domain that is meant to execute actions on a number of devices. Those would be great partners to us because we're not doing that part.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Actually, that was so helpful, and you did it in record time, just to pull that up. That was like, really great, Damien. So maybe a couple of quick questions. So you were going through and making those configuration changes, kind of adding a branch office to a particular, site and so forth. And you knew that. You can imagine, maybe in some period of time, how agents would be able to now use this, right? And so it's not a person behind a keyboard, but it's essentially an agent that's interacting with that, maybe through an API or what have you, right? So, when you're into the infrastructure and you're making changes to the infrastructure, one thing about kind of networking is that all applications utilize it. It's a shared resource. So if like something goes wrong, it can have devastating consequences, for a company. So I guess it's like, what architectural kind of governance guardrails do you envision that could be put in place, before you kind of let agents interact with this system, right? And kind of take advantage of the power that it has to make changes to that configuration.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, there's many way we can go about it. I guess the first one is, the workflow that I just showed. For example, I propose my first step was creating a branch, meaning
Yeah.
creating an isolated sandbox where I can propose my change and have it being reviewed before it being merged. So imagine
Hmm.
tomorrow if an agent could do that for me. It's actually already possible today. Like if an agent wants to make a change, he would create a branch, make a proposal, and then we'll have all the automated checks that I showed you, plus a human potentially reviewing things, plus you could have a lot of additional checkpoints to ensure that this change is safe before being deployed. That's I think the first one, and we have like all the RBAC capabilities so that you could say an agent can only make a change in a branch and cannot make a change in a production system without going through a branch and then approvals and all of that. So that's actually one of the that's why infrastructure people have been using Git in the first place is exactly for that, is to make
Mm.
changes safe. The main issue is that Git was optimized for human. Like Git is
Yeah.
such a great system for human, but it actually lacks some programmatic interfaces for agent. And so we through MCP servers, any form of APIs, all of that, it's very easy for an agent to actually interact and create a branch and propose changes, all of that. The other change is if you wanted an agent to go directly to your network device, it has to own the entire change process. Like it means you need to do the pre-change validation, the post-change validations, all of that.
Hmm.
By and it's actually a problem we've been having with any automation system we've built for the last 10 years. Is like every time we had to do that, it will create extremely complicated workflows through scripting, whatever tools we've been using for the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And having this intent solution like source like InfraHub, it has been a way for a while already to decouple the workflow and to make to to change the fact that someone that requests a change doesn't have to worry about how it's being deployed. And then the other component that is in charge of the deployment is also going to have a lot of self checks in mind, and it's going to be able to do like automated pre-change validation, post-change validations, potentially rollback managements, all of that in a way that the system that just wants something to change doesn't have to care or know about all of this complexity.
Mm.
And as much as agents are extremely powerful, they're still like the least you ask them, the better. Like in many ways, they can do amazing things, but the smaller the actual task that we want them to execute, the easier it is that this task is going to be, successful. So this architecture where we actually try to break down the domain of responsibility and have systems that are in charge of like making sure deployment is safe, making sure the digital representation of the intent is accurate, making sure we have the right APIs, like all these systems I think are even more important in the world of agentic now, because those agents, they're just sitting on top of all this already very powerful architecture, and then they can do even more.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think what's really good about that is that you're already starting to, or you have already thought about, okay, how does InfraHub interact within an agentic world, right? So so it's not um, restricted to kind of human in the loop, kinds of workflows. So I think
Yeah.
that's really good. So maybe if we kind of think about um, maybe one thing before I had two questions in my head. Like, let's do the data one first. So, how do you have a kind of canonical format that you use for data? Or like, every company has different ways in which they do configuration and interactions for that. Do you have like maybe modules that are supported for every vendor? Or how do you kind of deal with kind of a multi-vendor world that everyone is within?
For us, because we don't talk to the device,
Mm.
we're kind of natively, we support every vendor. So
Mhm.
actually, we have the way we've been storing data in source of truth has, for the most part, already been vendor agnostic for many years. And usually the way we think about the data is very vendor agnostic. And the way usually we make it vendor specific is when we convert and generate the configuration. Like it's actually
Mm.
the
Yeah.
configuration template that captures these more vendor specific things.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we, InfraHub, we don't provide the template. We provide the engine to render the templates and make it easy for you to manage your template.
Oh, I
So
see.
by this definition, like we support everybody because we're not providing this template for you. And so yeah, so we can work with any vendors. We can work with config files in text formats, but we can also work with any system that has more APIs and JSON or XML inputs, or like we're very very agnostic of which device you actually want to talk to, and yeah, so no opinions on that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. So then let's try to maybe you know put a crystal ball on and kind of think about how the industry may respond or progress. So so you mentioned a bunch of companies that around the orchestration side of it, Glueware in particular, Ansible, and others that would be good partners with OpsMill, right? Because they do kind of the orchestration, piece of it. They kind of then I would think send kind of commands, into InfraHub to do these kinds of configurations, and then InfraHub actually does the configuration piece of it. So I think I can kind of see that whole workflow. Then how do you think a knock changes? Over the next few years. So um, if Agentic it does live up to the hype that it's currently enjoying, so what happens to kind of maybe tier one network operations centers, and what might they look like, in say, 2 or 3 years from now? Like how automated do you think we can realistically get within the infrastructure, since everyone's so nervous about, automating the life cycle of this infrastructure because you get it wrong and the consequences are just so big. So anyway,
It's a good
so what's your
question.
crystal ball?
So yes, I guess the timeline is really going to depend on how far you're already into your journey. But maybe we can describe to me what the end picture looks like. If you think of a system, let's say in environments where you have a really good observability stack, you're already collecting a lot of information, so you're able to generate a lot of alerts, and then you have a very strong intent management platform like InfraHub that makes it possible for you to push changes to any device in your environments. Like to me,
Hmm.
that's the foundation. Once you have that, where I see the agentic is really to be the glue between those systems. Like, what has been really popular this year, last 2025 was MCP servers, because it gave this capability for any agents to connect to one or multiple data source. So now imagine if your agent has access to InfraHub, and he has access to Glueware, and he has access to your observability stack. And now every time there is an alert, then your agent is able to do the analysis of like, okay, I see an alert here. And he will be able, for example, to go to InfraHub and say, okay, tell me more about this interface. Where is it connected to? What are the different peers? Are they expected to be up? How critical are they? Like, you will be able to go collect a lot of the additional information that an operators will do today. And then you will be able to compute and say, okay, actually, that's a very high priority alert, or maybe that's a low one. Like, you will be able to do all this work and potentially, I'm not sure if we would let them run remediations all the way, but
Hmm.
at least the mean time to resolutions or to understanding the root cause of the problem and having multiple solutions, I feel like that's something that is that's just around the corner for us. Like
Mm.
we could use all of that in a very safe way. If you had InfraHub, you could potentially like create a branch, propose a change in that branch that would potentially fix that problem, and then wait for an humans to come and read the reports and just say, I accept this change or not, for example. Like that would be, I think, a very compelling workflow in today's world, in a sense that it actually doesn't touch anything on its own, but it prepares everything for you.
Yeah. So
Um,
let me see
I,
if I got that workflow right. So we have observability stack, and it identifies, kind of a problem. Maybe it's a link that's like kind of going up and going down. It's kind of flapping, or what have you. And then the observability, stack has access to that information, and then it basically says, okay, well, we need to like reconfigure that device. Here's the policies around that. That sends it to InfraHub. InfraHub then suggests a different configuration that will remediate that problem. And then that's when the human in the loop gets involved and like, hey, we're about to take this action. We're recommending you take this action. Either push go to go or ask for a modification or what have you before it actually does take that, step. Is that kind of like the workflow that you're suggesting?
it is kind of what it is, but I think there's it's actually a really good example, and maybe if we unpack it a little bit more,
Okay.
let's say you're running a service across two data centers, and one of your internet link is flapping.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you get that alarm, you understand it's a very critical link. The way a human will think about it is, okay, what should I do? And in some cases, we're just going to shut down the link because maybe we know that we have enough capacity on the same sites and it's going to be okay. But sometimes the network architect or the entire platform architects, maybe they design it that we should never lose one of the link, and that we don't have enough capacity on the other one, and we should instead like shut down the service and do a failover on another side. So my point is, to be able to make those decisions today, operators needs to have this global understanding of the design of your entire, at least network or infrastructure, to understand like, is it okay for me to shut down an entire site or not? Or should I just shut down a provider? Or should I just do this or that? And I think that's where it's so important to provide this context. Like the opportunity we have tomorrow is that we will be able to capture all this information about the design of our infrastructure and our networks and our application in a way that is accessible to AI. And then AI will be able to resonate on it and say, okay, I see that I cannot shut down this link, or I need to do a complete, failover of the site because for this customer and this application, that's the, model operator to actually do that. And I hope that highlights the importance of having this global picture, and, just having an interface flapping sometimes is actually, you cannot just say, I'm going to shut it down if it flaps, because that's how you end up with all your interface going down, without you realizing it, for example.
Yeah. And that's never a good thing. That's never a good day. Damien, I think this has been like really great. I know so much more about OpsNet and InfraHub and you, in particular, as well. So, just want to thank you, for doing the demo on the fly. That was like super great, So thank you for doing that. And I look forward to seeing you and meeting you in Dallas in a couple of months, as we get ready for the
That'd be
summit.
exciting. Looking forward to it as well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, great, Damien. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for plugging in and listening.
Thank you.